The New Orleans Saints have made massive additions to their team over the course of this offseason, but are they a playoff team, and what will their starting lineup look like? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Thursday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over at USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays at Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And in today's episode, we're going to be joined by NFL reporter from Pro Football Focus, Doug Kyed, who's going to talk to us a little bit about whether or not he believes the New Orleans Saints are a playoff team. We're going to take a look at my projected pre-training camp 2022 starting lineup on the offensive side. We'll get to defense tomorrow, and we're going to wrap up with everything you need to know around New Orleans Saints OTAs. Jameis Winston participating, not just in the building. What does it all mean? We'll get to that actually a little bit sooner rather than later. But to get us started, we're going to be joined here by Doug Kyed. What's going on with Abram Smith? What the New Orleans Saints have done so far this offseason? Are the New Orleans Saints a playoff team? Doug, tell me what you think. Doug, thanks so much for taking the time to come through and join us today on the show. Very excited to speak with you a little bit about these New Orleans Saints. And I want to start off with an undrafted free agent addition that the Saints made over the course of the offseason here. Abram Smith, the running back slash linebacker hybrid, I guess you can call him, out of Baylor, had a great lone season at running back last year in 2021. You talked about the contract that the Saints gave him on Twitter. You talked a little bit about how successful he was as well. The Saints didn't draft a running back in the draft, but did they get something here with Abram Smith potentially?
Yeah, I think that they definitely did. He's a little bit older. I think that could be one of the reasons why he didn't wind up getting drafted. Like you said, really only 1 year at running back, and he graded out exceptionally well for us last season. Among, draft eligible qualified running backs, I think there's about 50 to 100 of them. He ranked 5th in our total offensive grade with a 90.2. I think he was like 8th or 9th with an 89.7 run grade. Wow. He was pretty effective, as a pass catcher, as a pass blocker. So just overall, he was really impressive last season. He got a lot of yards after contact. I think he had 3.92 yards after contact, over 1,000 yards after contact in general. So he was just a really efficient running back. Didn't test overly well. He's got good size, but yeah, just kind of fell through the cracks a little bit. But the Saints definitely showed a lot of interest in him, gave him those heavy guarantees. And as it stands right now, based on his rookie contract, based on the guarantees, he's got a pretty good shot of making the roster, even though he was an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, I mean, look, that doesn't sound all too shabby at all when it comes to a guy that you get as an undrafted free agent. New Orleans has been a bit of an undrafted free agent destination for quite some time. Maybe Abram Smith ends up being the next kind of really good running back to come out of it. They've done it with Kyrie Robinson. They did it with Pierre Thomas, not Darren Sproles. There was another guy. Oh, Chris Ivory, of course, and a few others as well. So we'll see. That's great. I love the addition for them. But they've had some other key additions over the course of the offseason as well. Drafting wide receiver Chris Olave out of Ohio State, bringing in through free agency former LSU Tigers, which is really the way we have to refer to them on this show, with Tyrann Mathieu on the defensive side, and then, of course, Jarvis Landry on the offensive side. What do you make of those additions for the Saints?
Yeah, I think that overall it was definitely a net positive offseason for the Saints. Losing Terron Armstead, that obviously hurts, but I think that they were able to fill in the rest of the team and have a much more balanced roster, I'd say, coming into 2022 now, with the two safeties back there, Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu. Mm-hmm. So they definitely solidified their secondary a little bit there. And then obviously the biggest issue that they had, at least in my opinion, last year was their receiving core.
Right.
And they have almost completely overhauled that when you include Michael Thomas coming back, which is obviously probably the most important thing. But yeah, getting a guy like Jarvis Landry, he's getting a little bit up there in age. We'll see, how much he's got left in the tank, but he's a great slot receiver to add in there. And then you hope that Chris Olave can make an immediate impact as a rookie. And, the important thing with rookie wide receivers a lot of the time is just to get opportunities. Usually the guys who struggle, the high draft picks are the ones who don't see the field right away. And I don't think that Chris Olave is going to have any issue seeing the field right away in New Orleans. So yeah, I mean, I liked what they've done this offseason. Even getting, Trevor Penning, we'll see if he fills in there at left tackle. I know that that's probably the hope for them. See how much of a downgrade that will be from Terron Armstead, but at least they still filled in that gap. At least they still got someone in there and aren't just saying like, all right, we'll see what we've got left on the roster. So yeah, I mean, I think that they did a really good job this offseason in filling in those holes and having a more balanced roster.
Yeah, I love your point there about Trevor Penning. Like, Trevor Penning doesn't need to come in and be Terron Armstead. He just has to be kind of an average offensive lineman to start, right? And hopefully he develops and gets better than that, but he doesn't necessarily have to rise to that all-pro level right away in order to make the New Orleans or keep the New Orleans Saints offensive line sufficient, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that they actually wound up getting, in my opinion, a pretty good value in Trevor Penning. You had seen him being mocked, into the top 10. One popular scenario heading into the draft was, maybe the Panthers could trade down into, the 8 or 9 spot, draft Trevor Penning. Obviously, the draft shook out a little bit better for them, getting Ike Ekwonu. But I still think that, getting Penning where the Saints did was a pretty good value there. He's, maybe got a little rough around the edges. Maybe you have to work with him on technique and everything like that. But, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility for a rookie left tackle to come in and be a serviceable starter.
Absolutely. And certainly that's what the Saints will be looking forward to. I'm going to be doing offensive starter projections later on in the show. So we'll see where Trevor Penning slots in for me right away. But look, Doug, I want to wrap up kind of with the big question here around the New Orleans Saints team as a whole. And in particular, our friends over at the Peacock and Williamson NFL show, which is one of our flagship shows here on the network, they ranked the New Orleans Saints in their power rankings with playoff seeding sort of taken into consideration here as the 6th best team in the in the NFC. My apologies. And so with that being the case, that would mean them getting into the playoffs. So let me ask you kind of straight up here. Do you feel that the New Orleans Saints are a playoff team in 2022?
I think they are. And I think that, having that 7th playoff spot definitely helps them here as well, just because I don't necessarily know if they are the 6th best team in the NFC. They're probably somewhere around there, somewhere, 6 through 8, something like that. Obviously, a lot of it just depends on how Jameis Winston plays this season, if he can stay healthy, how he plays once he's on the field and everything like that, because they built up the rest of the roster. As I said before, I really do think it's one of the more balanced rosters around the NFL with the way that they put pieces around Jameis Winston. Now it's just to see what he can do in there. But definitely one thing that's certainly advantageous for the Saints is that the AFC got a lot stronger this year and the NFC got a lot weaker. So, I'd say that, based on the talent on the roster, including Jameis Winston, including everything else, like, are they definitely a top, above average team in the NFL? Maybe not, right. But I do think that they're an above average team in the NFC, just given how much things shook out this season. And, obviously this is the year that we're focusing on. I think that, even beyond this year, 2023 is going to be fascinating for me because they could wind up being the best team in the NFC South in 2023 pretty easily, even if they don't add anything next offseason, just based on the fact that Tom Brady's probably not going to be back in Tampa Bay. So, this season definitely very interesting for the Saints. 2023 might be even more fascinating for them.
Doug, I might need you to say it louder for the people in the back, my friend, but absolutely, absolutely, yes. It's a bright future, at least in the immediate future, thanks to what the New Orleans Saints have done so far this offseason. That is Doug Kyed from Pro Football Focus NFL reporter with our good friends over at PFF. You can follow him on Twitter at Doug Kyed, Kyed. Doug, we appreciate you so much for coming through for an episode of Locked On Saints, buddy. Hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely. Anytime, Ross.
All right, y'all. One more big thank you to Doug for joining the show. Coming up next, Jameis Winston, not just in the building, but participating at New Orleans Saints OTAs. What's the latest on he and Michael Thomas? We'll break it all down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, it is my absolute greatest pleasure. Not just a great pleasure, greatest pleasure to tell you about Built Bars and these brownie batter Built Puff Bars. These things are absolutely phenomenal. You see them. If you've been watching on YouTube, you're seeing the people in the comments talking about how these things are the truth. People hit me up on Twitter, letting me know that they're absolutely incredible, that they're unfair how good they are. It is unfair how good they are. But here's the thing. It is fair. It is fair because you can have several of these if you want them, because you're talking about 16, 17 grams of protein and at most like 9 grams of sugar in these things. Pretty flippin' incredible when it comes down to what you can get from a protein bar versus what you can get from a candy bar. And now you can have a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. So try it out for yourself, whether you get that brownie batter Built Puff, or maybe you want to try their other wild assortment of flavors, including like mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, coconut, almond, salted caramel, cookies and cream. I love these things, y'all. I love them. You can try it all out over at built.com. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKED, LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com. That's 15% off with the promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. All the biggest stories around the sports world covered in less than 20 minutes by the local experts and, of course, led by Peter Bukowski, including the wild things that come up on today's takes. Make sure you go and check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast on YouTube, the Odyssey app, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, before we get to our offensive projection, like starter projections. And when I say offensive, I mean on the offensive side of the ball. I'm not going to say anything offensive. All right. I'm not going to do that. But we're going to talk about the projected starters on the offensive side of the ball ahead of training camp. I want to fill you in on some big progress being made at OTAs. Now, OTAs are usually pretty light, right? Like this is kind of a gathering of 10 days to where you get a little bit of install, you get a little bit of playbook stuff, you get familiarity, language, all of those things, vocabulary. You start to put all that stuff together. It's not like contact and in pads or anything like that. And then you get to mandatory minis and all that stuff as well. But over the course of OTAs, what you do get to see sometimes is you get to kind of learn a little bit about the personality of the team that you root for. So when it comes to your New Orleans Saints, you should feel really good about where they are right now. I mean, you look across the NFL right now, Deebo Samuel, Kyler Murray, Terry McLaurin, all these guys not showing up to OTAs, not participating. And these are voluntary, right? Which means that guys don't have to participate in this at all, but they choose to. And now you've got Michael Thomas in the building, right? He didn't participate in practice, but like we said, we knew the New Orleans Saints were kind of going to be cautious around all this, considering how badly that ankle injury derailed everything for the past couple of years for the guy. So of course they're going to be cautious in that case. You got Jameis Winston, not only in the building, but participating. How wild is that? Like, we're talking about this guy coming off of an ACL injury not that long ago, right? Week 7, week 8 of the 2021 NFL season. And here he is when some people were saying, oh, Andy Dalton, this never came from anybody close to the Saints, right? This was all outside projection, outside perception of people trying to guess what the Saints were going to do, that they signed Andy Dalton because Jameis Winston wasn't going to be ready for the season. And now he's not only present for OTAs, he's throwing passes next to Andy Dalton and Ian Book, limited in OTAs, according to Nick Underhill. That is humongous for the New Orleans Saints because you get to build that connection with the starting quarterback, and you're not really missing a ton of beats here, right? He's not full participant or anything like that, but still, him tossing passes at practice, absolutely huge. So those are two huge updates coming out of there. You see the excitement from the Saints secondary, Alontae Taylor, CD Deuce, both tweeting about the sort of impact of this New Orleans Saints DB room. Tyrann Mathieu, of course, a big time contributor to that. So a lot. And there's going to be some storylines we're going to watch, right? Kahale Waring being added yesterday. We broke down his sort of potential in the Wednesday episode. If you want to catch up with that, it's right there for you. But, talking about him being added to the tight end room and how he ends up impacting that. What's Lucas Kroll going to look like? Does Abram Smith end up being a rising star when it comes to undrafted free agents like Pierre Thomas and Chris Ivory and those guys that we named earlier in the show when we were talking to Doug? So lots of stuff, content, big topics to watch out for over the course of the next month or so as OTAs kind of happen in these 3-day bursts or 3-day chunks. But the big news right now, getting Jameis Winston not only in the building, but participating, getting Michael Thomas in the building, absolutely huge for the New Orleans Saints. So now let's dive into, we'll start with quarterback and skill position. And then in just a moment, we'll get into the big conversation around the offensive line, which is whether or not James Hurst is going to be, let's just say, a starter in 2022 and what that might mean. But first, I want to kind of run through here what I believe the starters are going to look like for 2022. don't worry. You don't have to come and call me a genius because this is really easy, right? Jameis Winston is your starting quarterback. Your starting running back is Alvin Kamara. If he's not available, then very likely your starting running back is Mark Ingram, right? Depending upon the progress of the court case and everything like that. The hearing isn't even scheduled until August 1st, so it seems unlikely that a suspension is going to happen at the beginning of the season. We're not seeing the New Orleans Saints in much of a rush to get anything done with a veteran running back or anything like that. So clearly, like, maybe they know that they want somebody, right? They tried to sign Sony Michel, but maybe their sort of tempo towards it isn't the same as the public tempo towards it. So, or maybe they really like Devon Azigbo and Abram Smith and Mark Ingram and Tony Jones. Who knows, right? But Alvin Kamara is your starter, right? Very likely at the beginning of the season. Then at tight end, I think you're going to see, if we stick at 11 personnel here, I think your starter at tight end is very likely Adam Trautman, because the Saints will go with the blocking tight end as a starter. They always have, right? You look at Ben Watson, and I know Ben Watson did way more than block, right? He was somebody that also contributed as a receiver, but his primary responsibility for the most part, particularly toward during that second stint with the Saints, was as a blocker, even though he caught some touchdowns. But him doing that, and then you know Josh Hill was somebody that they love putting on the field, all that. So Michael Holloway often found like the starter tag because he was the first tight end on the field because it was a run play, right? So those things will sort of impact what the starter looks like on a week by week basis. But I think by the time that we get to the end of the season, the tight end with the most starts will likely be Adam Trautman. I would put Nick Van Etten in that conversation as well, but I think this team wants to know what it has in the third round draft pick that they traded their entire day 3 to get up and get. So I think that because of that, and because of where you started to see him kind of progress in 2022 before he got injured, that makes a lot of sense. And there's just not the expectations of the whole world on his shoulders this year like there kind of was last year. As for the wide receivers, it feels so good to say this. Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave. And the thing that's going to be really interesting is that like the way that I just listed that, you might feel like I'm saying Michael Thomas is wide receiver 1, Jarvis Landry is wide receiver 2, and then Chris Olave is wide receiver 3. I don't really do the wide receiver 1, 2, 3 thing. To me, it's your X split end is Michael Thomas, your slot receiver is Jarvis Landry, and your Z flanker is Chris Olave. A lot of people in YouTube comments and stuff like that have tried to tell me that that's an outdated perspective. Well, it's the one that the Saints use. So sorry. But when it comes down to it, those are going to be your guys that are going to be on the field at wide receiver. And doesn't that feel so much better than we were talking about Chris Hogan, Kenny Stills, and Kevin White last year, right? Like this is a much better place for the New Orleans Saints. And I think that the wide receiver 1, 2, 3 conversation in terms of who's the first option, who's the second option, who's the third option, it's going to change every single week. And that's part of the versatility and flexibility that guys like Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael will be able to maximize in this offense with those receivers. All right, coming up next, we're going to wrap up our look at the projected starters ahead of training camp on the offensive side of the ball with the offensive line. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's get into the big uglies, the trenches. Will James Hurst be a starter in 2022? And what does that mean for a first-round selection? We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with our closing out our look at projected starters ahead of training camp on the offense. We'll do defense tomorrow, which is going to be really interesting. Who's going to be the partner with David Onyemata on the defensive interior? What is that secondary going to look like? What's going to happen with Paul Sadivo and Alontae Taylor? We'll break down all of that tomorrow, so don't miss that. And of course, get you all the updates that you need from Thursday's OTAs as well. So here I want to talk about the trenches because I think it's very possible that James Hurst is a starter in 2022. With that being said, I think Trevor Penning starts at left tackle. Ooh, intrigue. Okay, let me tell you why I think this is the case. If you caught the episode late last week, if I remember correctly, Zach Strief talking about whether or not Trevor Penning has the opportunity to start at left tackle and who his competition is going to be, which was very clearly James Hurst. One of the things that Zach Strief said that I think is such a good coach move, and not just a good coach move, like as if it's fabricated or false. I mean, it's a great mentality to have as a coach, and it kind of shows the Sean Payton stamp on this coaching staff is still very much present. You go back to the 2006 Return of the Dome game. Yeah, I'm going all the way back there. One of the things that ESPN highlighted so loudly about Sean Payton were his comments about the 2006 draft class, as well as undrafted free agents. and him talking about the idea of how a player joins a team goes away once they sign the contract. Doesn't matter if they're a first-round pick, a sixth-round pick, a seventh-round pick like Zach Strief was, an undrafted free agent like guys like Pierre Thomas and now Abram Smith, who we've been talking about, that no matter what, everyone has the same opportunity once they get to the practice facility. And if you listen to what Zach Strief said, one of the things that he said was, if one of those guys, Trevor Penning and James Hurst, doesn't win that role, then they become competition for the other four positions on the offensive line. I believe very strongly that tackles need to play tackle. However, James Hurst has already played just about every position on the offensive line throughout his career. So if Trevor Penning is starting at left tackle, Andrus Peat is starting at left guard, Erik McCoy is starting at center, what happens with Cesar Ruiz? Could there be a competition there at right guard between Cesar Ruiz and James Hurst? And I bring that up because I don't think you're going to push Trevor Penning to move from left tackle to right guard at the beginning of his career. I don't think that that's going to happen. Moving him from left tackle to left guard, okay, but I think tackle should play tackle. So I would say move him to right guard and have Ryan Ramczyk play left tackle before anything else. But I think Ryan Ramczyk is firmly entrenched as your right tackle. So the interesting conversation here are the two guards. Is Andrus Peat ready to start the season? And if not, does that mean that James Hurst has a roster spot as a starter at the beginning of the year at left guard? Or is there a competition between, at right guard, James Hurst and Cesar Ruiz after the competition sort of gets settled between Trevor Penning and James Hurst? Like, let's just be real. I think that the Saints want Trevor Penning to be the starter at left tackle, right? They want that future tackle there. And like we just talked about, he doesn't have to be the all-pro that Terron Armstead was. He just has to be a left tackle. And he has to be a better left tackle than an average left tackle. And if you get an average left tackle out of him for his first year and then continue to develop him from there, win, dub, big time. That's great. That's your first round draft selection not going down the toilet. That's great. That's fantastic in terms of what you can get from Trevor Penning in that case, who has a high ceiling, but has a lot of technical stuff that he has to work on, a lot of fundamental stuff that he has to work on. He hasn't been playing the position for that long, but he's young and has that development potential, unlike a guy like Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan, who was also tossed around as a potential option for the New Orleans Saints at that spot. So is there a chance that James Hurst is a starter in 2022, week 1? Yeah, because there's 3 positions this guy could be in line for, and he's good enough to play any of the 3. He can play left tackle and you won't go belly up. He can play left guard and you'll far from go belly up. He can play right guard and potentially be an improvement based upon what Cesar Ruiz has put on tape thus far, and give Cesar Ruiz time to continue to work with Doug Marrone, develop, and get better. And then maybe you swap Cesar Ruiz in or something like that, or Andrus Peat comes back and he's healthy later on in the season, a couple weeks into the season, and then he takes his spot back, and then James Hurst goes back to being your flex guard tackle. In the case that James Hurst is on the starting lineup, I don't think that you make Andrus Peat or Cesar Ruiz your flex tackle or your flex guard tackle, because Andrus Peat would be injured. That's the only reason why he wouldn't be starting in 2022 with that price tag. But Cesar Ruiz, you just want to keep focusing on him developing as a guard. So you keep him there. And then Calvin Throckmorton serves as your all-purpose extra tackle, right? Your sixth man. You don't lose that element of the game just by having James Hurst start somewhere on your offensive line. This New Orleans Saints offensive line very likely going to be better than most people expect. Not the people in New Orleans, but most people expect from the outside looking in at Terron Armstead being gone. I think this offensive line has the ability, because of the depth, because of the talent, because of the carved out roles that this coaching staff has already baked them into, right? These guys are already cookie cut into where they're going to be. And the good thing is that cookie cutter changes shape all the time. So a guy like Calvin Throckmorton can play guard. He can play tackle. A guy like Erik McCoy can play guard. He could play center. Cesar Ruiz, play guard, play center. Like, you have all this versatility all over the place. So you don't lose it if James Hurst ends up taking a starting role because he beats out Trevor Penning at left tackle, because Andrus Peat isn't ready to go at the beginning of the season coming off of his injury, because you want to give Cesar Ruiz more time to develop behind the scenes. Then you've got Calvin Throckmorton. Then you've got Landon Turner. Then you've got these other guys that the Saints really, really like that end up continuing to fill in as depth pieces all over the offensive line, plus a focused depth piece when it comes to James Hurst or Cesar Ruiz if he's not starting. So there's a lot of opportunity there for James Hurst. And there's a lot of opportunity for this New Orleans Saints team, especially knowing that they're already starting to get like all this communication and cohesion together with their starting quarterback, their play caller, their coach, all this stuff. It's all coming together. It's all coming together. And that's one of the reasons why I agree with Doug's assessment earlier that the New Orleans Saints are a playoff team in 2022. And 2023 can be even more exciting if Tom Brady retires for more than 47 hours, right? And I don't know, maybe he'll retire again. He's having a good time playing golf and, fake CGIing hole-in-ones and whatever. So whatever. All that to say, the New Orleans Saints are in a good place heading in to the training camp, offseason activities, all that, barring, anything catastrophic. Now, tomorrow we're going to get to the defensive side. Who's starting next to David Onyemata? What's going on in the secondary? Who is the guy at linebacker next to Demario Davis, or really who's behind those guys, Demario Davis and Pete Werner? We'll break all of that down tomorrow, as well as keep you up to date with everything going on with your New Orleans Saints throughout OTAs. Don't forget, we're doing something here. Make sure to let me know either on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the comments about your favorite all-time Saint. Gathering those for the rest of the week. Going to use that for a piece later on down the way as we continue on throughout the offseason. I appreciate you so much. As always, make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure it is Locked On NFL. Colin Kaepernick's getting tryouts all of a sudden with the Las Vegas Raiders. You've got the holdout situations going on all around the NFL. Which ones should you care about? Which ones are of a concern? Which ones would impact the New Orleans Saints that you want to know about? Locked On NFL's got you covered. Locked On NFL has just simply got you covered in less than 30 minutes, everything you need to know around the league. I appreciate you as always for making me a part of your day today. Be back with you tomorrow for everything you need in between these episodes. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, Nola. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.